Greetings, YouTubers. In this edition, we're going over something I have touched on this before several times. And I'll be using this in later responses. There are a lot of Obama supporters who railed and autistically mentioned that Bush loves the Patriot Act and Bush was spying on Americans, and he does. He deserves a lot of blame. And as we go through some of this stuff, it's apparent that this, if you've watched all my videos, you know that this government oppressing, peeing on the Fourth Amendment, and interning people without trial and all kinds of stuff like that, it's been going on for a long time. It was going on long before George W. Bush was even conceived. So for those people, it's not news. For a lot of Democrats, it probably is because, well, when you listen to Rachel Maddow flap his gums, and we listen to Fat Ed Schultz flap his jowls and his teeth, you're not going to know any of this. But they railed against the Patriot Act and things like that and Bush's authoritarianism, but Obama's done the same thing, and he's even gone a lot further. And I'm just going to demonstrate this a little more. Go through a lot of stories here. We got a lot of ground to cover. Hidden microphones, San Francisco Chronicle. Hidden microphones that are part of a clandestine government surveillance program that has been operating around the Bay Area has been exposed. Imagine standing at a bus stop, talking to your friend, and having your conversation recorded without you knowing. It happens all the time, and the FBI doesn't even need a warrant to do it. Well, they say they don't, but they do. They should. Or their ass should go to jail. Federal agents are planting microphones to secretly record conversations. They put microphones under rocks and trees and equipment and all kinds of stuff. FBI agents hid mics inside light fixtures at a bus stop outside the Oakland courthouse without a warrant to record conversations between March 2010 and January 2011. You may remember the U.S. versus Jones case, where the Hussein administration got slapped down for defending in court. The police put a GPS device on a man's car. That's a search. They didn't get a warrant to do it. Now you could place a police car outside the house and follow them around, but that's not clandestine. And they got slapped down by the Supreme Court. An agent just can't go out and grab a recording device and plant it somewhere without authorization from a supervisor or special agent in charge. So Hussein knows this is going on. The FBI is just doing it, and they don't give a damn because they think they're above the law. So, and as we go through, just remember this, folks. Remember all the times the government just pees on the Constitution and does what it wants. And remember that when they start lecturing people on what counts as extremism and how people should act, they are huge hypocrites. These people need to be held accountable. A new FBI initiative based on Britain's anti-terror mass surveillance program instructs high schools across America. Now, this is part of the reason the Democrats like public education so much. This is brainwashing 101. This is livestock management. Instructs high schools across America to inform on students who express, quote, anti-government and, quote, anarchist political beliefs. So basically, whatever they decide is extremist or anti-government, preaching too much of that their Constitution. Are you anti-government if you call out Obama for murdering 4 American citizens with drone attacks? I had that in a previous video, one of my previous videos. Are you anti-government if you call out Obama for his Bush-esque, FDR-esque urinating on the Fourth Amendment? Huh? The document claims public school educators, this is the brainwashing, this is why a lot of people want to homeschool their kids. They don't want this LGBT brainwashing. They don't want the climate change brainwashing. They don't want fiat currency brainwashing. They don't want government is the be-all, end-all brainwashing. The document claims they don't like choice. Yeah, choice is bad. Imagine if you went to a store and had one type of mustard to choose from. That would be great, wouldn't it? Or just one different kind of car. That's what they want with public education. One size fits all. The document claims public school educators are in a unique position, which they are, to effect change and brainwash, impart affirmative messaging, brainwash, or facilitate intervention activities, including informing on students. It calls for observing and assessing. Again, I have all the links underneath the video. Check them out at your leisure. Observing and assessing concerning behaviors and communications of students. Embracing extremist ideology. So, if you're for a gold standard and you say the Constitution doesn't preach a fiat currency, doesn't call for a fiat currency, the founders never intended for the government to be able to print the currency at will, you might be an extremist. They're going to hide it under the guise of terrorism, though, but they're going to lump you constitutionalists, you Ron Paul crazies, under that tent as well. The FBI considers the redemption theory, the abandonment of the gold standard in favor of fiat currency, emancipation from the responsibilities of being a U.S. citizen, including paying taxes and conspiracy theories. Does that include 9/11 twoofers too? Including the formation of global government and a police state as indicators of extremist or sovereign citizen ideology. So just remember, as we go through all this stuff, you're going to see that we are in the midst of a huge police state. And if you believe that, then you are an extremist. And you may be an enemy of the government. You may need to be monitored without a warrant, of course. Extreme anti-tax group. So if you favor repeal of the 16th Amendment, are you an extreme anti-taxer? Because we all know the government, as soon as they got an income tax, boom, spending shot through the roof. This does remind me of the East German Stasi. Kind of reminds me of something Obama dropped, the Civilian National Police Force. He hasn't said much about that since 2008, but he was talking about that in 2008. This is like the East German Stasi, preventing violent extremism in schools. High school students are ideal targets for recruitment by violent extremists seeking support for their radical ideologies. Foreign fighter networks are conducting acts of targeted violence within our borders. Of course, black on black crime that's a lot more than any mass killing or all of them put together in a year. Are they complaining about that? No. High schools must remain vigilant in brainwashing their students about catalysts that drive violent extremism, like the gold standard, and the potential consequences of embracing extremist beliefs. Like maybe you need a warrant before you monitor people, and if you don't, you should go to prison. They're going to save us from extremism. You see, under the guise of protecting students, they will engage in brainwashing. Social media. Now, this goes back to something I've talked about many times, like Senator Feinstein and that piece of garbage Senator Burr, basically wanting to turn every social media outlet into a snitch service. You know, Feinstein got shot down thanks to Rand Paul and Ron Wyden. I went over that in my Old Fart Rants, ISIS, and those warmonger Republicans video. The inundation of violent extremism in mainstream culture can be aligned in part with technological advances. As new technologies have emerged, another name you'll hear mentioned in this video a few times is Edward Snowden. So too is a virtual spread of violent extremism. Violent extremist organizations' ability to transcend geographical boundaries is made possible by the internet and the use of social media. So everybody on social media should be treated like a terrorist. Violent extremist troll for youth, for stupid youth, because where are the parents? Where are these parents? Where are they? Violent extremists troll for youth in social media or online forums to spot, assess, and recruit those who are vulnerable. Raise the minimum wage of $15 an hour, and then they won't have a job, and then they can spend more time on social media. This targeting of youth is increasingly putting them at risk, as many are tech savvy. Yeah, they know how to post on Facebook all day and upload videos all day on YouTube and flap their gums on Discus and whatever other form, but they don't read a book. They can't get a job. Many are tech savvy and often spend large quantities of time on social media networks. Today's youth strongly depend on social media and seek immediate connections or gratification. Where are the parents? This change in interpersonal communications often replaces normal face-to-face interactions. Isn't it amazing how some people, they live in a social media bubble? Reminds me of some people I've refuted on YouTube that spend all their time online. There's a fake doctor, and then there's a guy who doesn't brush his teeth. The need for connectivity, acceptance, again, where are the parents, or sense of belonging, where are the parents, or as a local community, can drive their overall needs online activities in their social sphere of influence. According to a Psychiatric Times article entitled, "Why Are Young Westerners Drawn to Terrorist Organizations Like ISIS?" All they need is jobs. I bet if we raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that would erase it. Dated September 2015, researchers opine that youth can be easily tempted by the false allure of quick and easy social connections amidst an individualistic, get that, individualistic society. We are collective, from which they feel alienated. Retards are easily manipulated. And collectivist societies are anti-terror, of course. Oh, an individualistic society. You see how this is communism 101 and collectivism 101 if you read through this whole thing. Again, they're using this as they're going to try to put the clamps on all social media. You're all terrorists. Senator Feinstein and that piece of garbage Burr already tried it. They're going to try it again. While online recruitment is one potential vulnerability, social media also provides youth a platform for identifying violent extremists or becoming curious about the subject matter to conduct research, gaining an appreciation or understanding of its principles. Youth may find the content appealing or attractive, especially when they meet others online who are violent extremists and viewed as rational people. Ambiguity 101. These online contacts offer meaning and understanding to the ideological underpinnings that drive acceptance of radical beliefs or support for future actions. And see how they're going to lump all kinds of... If you quote the Constitution too much, or you don't just worship the Federal Reserve, you're going to be an extremist. These interactions result in bringing new supporters into the fold. And of course, if you're online and social media, you might be a terrorist. Better do something about this. And this one's pretty stupid. Several extremist organizations disseminate online magazines, and a lot of organizations do this, intended for their supporters. Well, who the hell doesn't? According to analysts on Al-Qaeda's Inspire magazine conducted at Georgia State University, the goals of these online magazines are threefold. And a lot of organizations do this: conservative, libertarian, and progressive, and classical liberal. I don't use liberal because these modern day Democrats aren't liberal. They're progressives, they're communists, they're collectivists. What organization does do is providing a platform to disseminate information or propaganda, depending on who you are. It might be propaganda to supporters. A lot of motivating supporters to act. Well, think about these progressive organizations that send out these form emails where all you have to do is sign to send something to your congressman. You don't have to read it, and you don't have to read or be able to understand a word with more than one syllable. Just sign it and put your email address and street address on it, and you send a form mail to them. Who doesn't do that? And providing tools to mobilize. Wow. Does the NEA do that? I think they do. So are they a terrorist organization? What organization doesn't do things like this, minus the cutting off of heads? This is so ubiquitous it could be used to target any organization, Muslim, terrorist, or otherwise, as an extremist organization. Bush administration. The 2002 Safe School Initiative under the Bush administration, drafted jointly by the U.S. Secret Service and the U.S. Department of Education, shares the same conclusion. The SSI stated the use of profiles is not an effective tool for identifying students who pose a risk for targeted violence or assessing the risk of that a particular student may pose for targeted violence. Again, where are the frickin' parents? What the hell happened to parents? Oh, yeah, the destruction of the nuclear family. I'm sorry. Rather, schools should focus on a student's behaviors and communications to determine if the student appears to be planning or preparing for an attack. And I'm sure they'll read the Fourth Amendment prior to doing this, right? The SSI conclusion also applies within a violent extremism context, as students on the pathway to becoming radicalized often exhibit behaviors or engage in communications indicating support for extremist ideologies, again, ambiguity alert, or highlighting future intentions. This progression is paramount to educators who rely on recognition of such concerning behaviors and communications to initiate the disengagement process intended to direct students down a less destructive path. Preaching the Constitution has become an extremist ideology. Scorning a fiat currency is an extremist ideology. This is just the tip of the iceberg, folks, and it's going to get worse. It's going to get crazier as we move on through this. This is interesting. Online gaming is causing rampant terrorism. So we better, and terrorists use airplanes sometimes in terrorist acts, so we should ban airplanes in online gaming. This is ridiculous. A 2003 study conducted by Loyola University Chicago suggests online gaming promotes social interactions. Whoa! Did somebody have to get a PhD to figure that out? Develops expressive skills, aids strategy formulation, and promotes planning in a simulated environment. Oh, Islamic terrorism. If your kid's playing Call of Duty, he might be a terrorist. The gaming environment facilitates social connections by strangers sharing common interests. Oh, Facebook's a terrorist tool. Facebook's terrorist tool. Better monitor them. Online gaming can also teach rudimentary warfare protocols, rules of engagement, and other military actions, which can be applied to real-life scenarios such as conducting an act of targeted violence. So there you go, folks. Call of Duty creates mass murderers and terrorists. This is ridiculous. You see how the links they're going to go to treat everybody like a potential terrorist. And again, who needed, did they have to get a PhD to see that online gaming promotes these social interactions? This is a huge load of government propaganda. I'm more worried. I fear our government more than I fear Al-Qaeda. Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump are a bigger threat to this country and our liberty than Al-Qaeda. And I stand by that statement. Okay, so let's apply this reasoning to Hollywood. All these Hollywood actors who support Obama and Clinton. All these deep-pocketed actors. And a lot of these deep-pocketed actors, you got the fat Amy Schumer, who's a nobody, basically. But Chris Evans is a big hitter. And he's talking about nobody's going to take away your guns, but we got to do something. And all these Selena Gomez and all these jackasses. So let's apply this reasoning to Hollywood's violent movies. Jeremy Renner, every movie you've ever been in, you kill a bunch of people. Uh-oh, that's creating terrorists. That's creating mass murders. Who else? Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger, every movie you're in, you blow people up and kill people. Is that creating terrorism? Who else is another one? Think of a progressive tool. Jim Carrey, how many movies have you been in where you kill people in cartoon fashion? Just think of any Hollywood progressive that makes you want to throw up in your mouth. And if they've been in violent movies where they kill people. Matt Damon, how many movies have you been in where you've killed people? In the movie, of course. Just so nobody gets crazy. Oh, you're killed him. No. How many movies has Matt Damon been in where he's killed people? Oh, so let's go after Hollywood. Why don't we monitor Hollywood and shut down their movies then? This is ridiculous. In closing, for this section, why are you folks so paranoid? You've only got a president who has murdered 4 American citizens sans trial, another president who locked brown people away in internment camps for their own good, you see. We're only almost $20 trillion in debt. Washington has gone from skirting the Fourth Amendment to openly and brazenly doing away with it. More on that in a moment. Erected an income tax code that will be used to audit you into oblivion if you're spending more than they think you should be spending, and if you lack the resources to fight that audit, good luck. And a government that has an insatiable appetite for war and cronyism. Glad to see they're trying to enlist public brainwashers in on this. So if little Timmy is preaching too much of that Constitution, preaching too much of that, the Constitution doesn't mention a fiat currency, they're printing money, burying us in debt, then little Timmy might be sent somewhere for re-education. The Leviathan knows best, and a lot of these morons will jump on this because they have a cult of the presidency mentality. They are low-information idiots who are so stupid they will willingly walk into the slaughterhouse thanking the butcher as he delivers the final blow. Now, moving on to our next section. Continuing with our slapdown of Hussein Obama, the imitator of George W. Bush. Hussein Obama on Friday, this is back in March of 2016, March of this year. Hussein Obama on Friday made a passionate case for mobile devices to be built in such a way. Now keep in mind, we'll get into this later. Why is he asking mobile devices to be built in such a way as to allow government to gain access to personal data if needed to prevent a terrorist attack or enforce tax laws? It's for your own good, folks. We're going to pee on the Fourth Amendment for your own good. Speaking at the South by Southwest Festival in Texas, Hussein said he could not comment on a legal case in which the FBI is trying to force Apple to allow access to an iPhone linked to San Bernardino shooter. Despite his commitment to Americans' privacy, bull, and civil liberties, a balance was needed. No, the Fourth Amendment, there is no debate. There's no balance. There's no give and take. You get a warrant or you don't do it. You better give the government a back door, bro, because they have never violated the Constitution, nor have they ever abused power. And then he says, if technologically it is possible to make an impenetrable device or system, and that's why Apple does this, because they know people will buy their products because their data is safe, the whole be safe and secure. If technologically it is possible to make an impenetrable device or system where the encryption is so strong that we can't violate the Fourth Amendment, that there is no key, there's no door at all, then how do we apprehend the child pornographer? How do we solve or disrupt a terrorist plot? Hussein said. Oh boy. Yeah, we may have to scrap the Fourth Amendment, folks, because there are some folks out there who like the gold standard. We may have to scrap the Fourth Amendment because, terrorists and stuff. You might be a terrorist, so we need to have the ability to shackle anyone at any time. It's in your best interest, We got to protect you guys from terrorists, so give up your civil liberties. We'll take it from here. This is precisely why I'm voting for Gary Johnson this November, not Hillary Clinton, not Donald Trump. You people will get what you vote for. I'm just sorry I have to live in the same vicinity as some of you people. This reminds me of that fat pig, Chris Christie, and Newt Gingrich goes in this too. That fat pig, Chris Christie, using victims of 9/11 as political human shields during a GOP debate last year in a spat with Rand Paul. This morbidly obese, disgusting pile of pig crap, Christie harkened back to piles of dead bodies and meeting their families, invoking visions of horror and distress. Ergo, we can urinate on the Fourth Amendment anytime we want to. This is in line with Newt Gingrich, Obama, and George W. Bush's thinking. The Fourth Amendment is not negotiable. And you, Chris Christie, if you happen to be listening to this, you are a piece of crap. Moving on, James Clapper, U.S. intelligence chief. Obama's right in with this too. That's why I showed you that previous screenshot in his comments. U.S. intelligence chief, we might use the Internet of Things to spy on you. So why don't you come in? What would happen if James Clapper had to come in my house and spy? Because this is a search. This counts as a search. What would happen to him? Boy, this pisses me off. Should piss you off too. The U.S. intelligence chief has acknowledged for the first time that agencies might use a new generation of smart household devices to increase their surveillance capabilities. As increasing numbers of devices connect to the internet and to one another, the so-called Internet of Things promises consumers increased convenience. The remotely operated thermostat from Google-owned Nest is a leading example. But as home computing migrates away from the laptop, the tablet, and the smartphone, experts warn that security features on the coming wave of automobiles, dishwashers, and alarm systems lag far behind. In an appearance at a Washington think tank last month, the director of National Security Agency, Admiral Michael Rogers, said that it was time to consider making the home devices more defensible, but did not address the opportunities that increased numbers of and even categories of connected devices provide to his surveillance agency. However, James Clapper, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, was more direct in testimony submitted to the Senate on Tuesday as part of an assessment of threats facing the United States. In the future, intelligence services might use the Internet of Things for identification, surveillance, monitoring, location tracking, and targeting for recruitment or to gain access to networks or user credentials. Now, the government would never undermine people and spy on you like you're all terrorists and treat you all like underlings, would they? And what's going to happen with a government that gets that powerful? You people just going to let them steamroll you? It's a great R. Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump are both right in the middle of this, as you'll see. And real quick, I don't think I'm going to go over this in detail. The CIA campaign to steal Apple secrets. Edward Snowden's name comes up in this. Again. Basically, I'll just, in short, our government has done anything and everything it can to thwart Apple's attempts to make their security impenetrable. U.S. government-sponsored research has been aimed at discovering ways to decrypt and ultimately penetrate Apple's encrypted firmware. Law enforcement agencies want the companies to maintain the government's ability to bypass security tools built into their wireless devices because, they'd never abuse that, would they? No, they wouldn't. Matthew Green, a cryptography expert at Johns Hopkins University, said this: tearing apart the products of U.S. manufacturers and potentially putting backdoors and software distributed by unknowing developers all seems to be going a bit beyond targeting the bad guys. It may be a means to an end, but it's a hell of a means. So, there you go. Edward Snowden, I think he's a hero. Hillary Clinton doesn't. Thinks he should face the music. I've got a link for that down there. So, we'll probably go over that later. There you go. Edward Snowden should be commended for bringing this out in the open. What if I was trying to find ways to get past Apple's security measures and using stingrays? I would go to prison. But our government, that's why the founders put the Fourth Amendment in the Constitution. They understood what scumbags these people are. And Hussein Obama and Hillary Clinton are right up there with them. It's okay for the government to openly try and hack Apple devices, but if you openly speak for a gold standard and demand Washington honor the Constitution, you're an extremist. What hypocrisy. I've got links down there for Hillary Clinton on Edward Snowden. Want to remind everybody. Hillary Clinton on Edward Snowden. Erie County, and there's another one I'm going to go over. Erie County forced to hand over stingray documents. A few weeks ago, a New York judge ruled that the Erie County Sheriff's Office had inappropriately denied a Freedom of Information request from the New York Civil Liberties Union regarding the office's use of stingray cell phone trackers. The judge ordered, these are devices that mimic a cell tower. The judge ordered the sheriff to release documents that had been inappropriately withheld. Yesterday, the sheriff complied, and the documents prove exactly what transparency and civil liberty advocates had been arguing. These devices are often deployed in complete secrecy with no judicial oversight, no Fourth Amendment, nothing. The sheriff's office used stingrays at least 47 times between May 1st, 2010 and October 3rd, 2014, including to assist other law enforcement departments like the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. It appears that the office only obtained a court order in only one of those 47 circumstances in October 2014. And even in that case, it was not a warrant, but a lower-level court order called a pen register order. This contradicts what the sheriff said to a local reporter and undermines what he said to the legislature, that this device, is being used subject to judicial review. It isn't. The federal government is directly complicit in the secrecy, forcing law enforcement agencies to sign, this is Obama's FBI and Justice Department, forcing law enforcement agencies to sign non-disclosure agreements in exchange for use of the device. So we'll allow you to violate the hell out of the Fourth Amendment as long as you don't say anything about it. The agreement even contains provisions giving the FBI the authority to compel prosecutors to drop criminal cases rather than reveal the stingray use to the court. So, in other words, we could have a case where somebody who is legitimately guilty, if the government followed the law, they might get them. Maybe letting real criminals go because the government doesn't care, and that could end up being bad for people. And then you got the non-disclosure agreement. It says the Erie County Sheriff's Office will, at the request of the FBI, seek dismissal of the case in lieu of using or providing or allowing others to use or provide any information concerning the Harris Corporation wireless collection equipment technology, its associated software, operating manuals, etc. In other words, they want to keep everybody completely in the dark. Civil liberty advocates have long assumed its existence based on several instances of serious criminal charges being dropped when scrupulous defense attorneys or judges start inquiring into how police were able to locate suspects. That implication raises a troubling question. How often has evidence from illicit stingray use been allowed to stand because neither the judge nor the lawyer knew what to look for? So, this is scary. Do you have enough time to write your senators and congressmen about this and raise hell? Following a court-ordered document dump in New York earlier this week, a Baltimore detective yesterday testified in court that he had personally used a stingray between 600 and 800 times during 2 years as a member of the Baltimore Police Department's advanced technical team. He also testified that the unit has used such devices 4,300 times since 2007. The Baltimore detective, I'll let you, if you want to, freeze it and read the whole thing for yourself. The Baltimore detective refused to produce the device in court, citing an FBI non-disclosure agreement. The FBI, they are knowingly, willingly, brazenly violating the Fourth Amendment. Do you guys realize how serious this is? The FBI in turn produced an agreement so restricted that police and prosecutors, and dang them for going along with this, can be obligated to withdraw evidence or even drop charges rather than disclose the use of devices to the court. So it's the same crap over and over. Despite repeated references to terror, this is what Fat Chris Christie would do, and Obama and Newt Gingrich and Hillary and Donald Trump probably. Despite repeated references to terrorists and national security as a means for maintaining secrecy about stingray use, the data that has been released detailing the purposes of actual stingray investigations, such as this breakdown from the Tallahassee Police Department that contains not a single terrorism reference, suggests that stingrays are used virtually entirely for routine law enforcement investigations. So, to lay it out for you in simple terms, it's not for terrorism, it's for control. Okay, this is 1930s Nazi Germany manifestations, 1930s Germany police statism. It's all about control. They don't give a damn about terrorism. That's the cover for it. So they can treat you people like the subjects they think you are. In Maryland U.S. District Court last fall, an argument about the stingray device was cut short when the suspects took plea deals. And on Wednesday, following Cabrera's testimony, prosecutors and defense attorneys entered into plea negotiations instead of debating the merits of the stingray further. Defense attorneys are being able to get really good deals for their clients because the FBI is so insistent on hiding all these details. It stands to reason that at least some of the suspects receiving sweetheart deals from prosecutors as a result of FBI meddling are actually guilty of serious criminal behavior. Thus, secret law enforcement stingray use not only threatens the constitutional rights of everyone swept up in the signal dragnets and the rights of suspects who are charged and presumably have been convicted based on improper evidence, but also undermines a fundamental principle of criminal law, bringing actual criminals to justice. This makes me harken back to something that happened in Washington State a couple years ago where the Navy was illegally monitoring a child pornographer, and the judge had to throw his conviction out. And he was a child pornographer, but he threw it out because the Navy didn't go to a judge and get a warrant to do this. So a child pornographer went on the loose because they didn't get a warrant. The FBI. This is Obama's FBI. The FBI is taking the position that court warrants are not required when deploying cell site simulators in public places. Nicknamed stingrays, the devices are decoy cell towers that capture locations and identities of mobile phone users and can intercept calls and texts. The FBI made its position known during private briefings with staff members of Pat Leahy and Leaky Leahy and Senator Chuck Grassley. In response, the two lawmakers wrote Eric Holder and Homeland Security Chief Jay Johnson maintained they were concerned about whether the FBI and other law enforcement agencies have adequately considered the privacy interests of Americans. Well, I think the Fourth Amendment is pretty clear, Chuck and Pat. Heads need to roll. According to the letter, for example, we understand that the FBI's new policy requires FBI agents to obtain a search warrant whenever a cell site simulator is used as part of an FBI investigation or operation, unless one of the several exceptions apply, including cases that pose an imminent danger to public safety, whatever that means. Maybe somebody's dealing drugs. That's an imminent danger to public safety. Cases that involve a fugitive, or cases in which the technology used in public places or other locations at which the FBI deems there is no reasonable expectation of privacy, which means they don't give a damn. Holy moly. The letter was prompted in part by a Wall Street Journal report in November that said the Justice Department was deploying small airplanes equipped with cell site simulators that enabled investigators to scoop data from tens of thousands of cell phones in a single flight, collecting their identifying information and general location. Okay, yeah. The Bureau's position on Americans' privacy isn't surprising. The Obama... What if I tap my neighbor's phone? I wonder what would happen. Think I'd go to prison? Or could I... If my name was Charlie Rangel, I might be able to get away with it. The Obama administration has repeatedly maintained that the public has no privacy in public places. It began making that argument as early as 2010, just like the Bush administration would, because terrorism, when it told a federal appeals court that the authorities should be allowed to fix GPS devices, I did a video on that, on vehicles and track a suspect's every move without court authorization. The Supreme Court, however, eventually slapped down Hussein on that, and he got humiliated. He was defending just the same things the Bush administration would have done. A federal judge last month disagreed with the government's position, tossing evidence gathered by a webcam that was operated from afar. So good for him, and bad for the government. But that's anything that's bad for the government is usually good for us. Moving on. Here's some more proof of the surveillance state. Earlier this year, the Library Freedom Project launched an initiative to test the use of Tor exit relays in local libraries as a means of helping library patrons browse the internet anonymously. It was Kilton Library in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and it's one of two Lebanon libraries, and the IT librarian there wanted to make it possible for you to browse the internet without being spied on. Most library environments run Microsoft Windows, and we know that Microsoft participated in the NSA's PRISM surveillance program. If you remember, the NSA was started by Harry Truman via executive order. So basically, they were able to make it possible for the government to spy on them. What happened is the Kilton Public Library in Lebanon, New Hampshire, was contacted by the Department of Homeland Security. Hussein's got in touch with their police department and basically insinuated that, you can't browse anonymously because you might be a terrorist. And, this is just more proof in the pudding that they are monitoring probably a lot of stuff, and you may be under the watchful eye of the NSA and not even know it, because you might be an extremist. So there's more proof for you. You're a terrorist. We don't need a Fourth Amendment. We don't need to follow the Fourth Amendment. We are going to monitor you. Period. So here's another one. This is a big one, and this is Edward Snowden. You can thank him for this. DEA secretly tracked Americans' calls for well over a decade, actually. A new document reveals that the U.S. Department of Justice secretly kept track of Americans' calls to foreign countries for more than a decade to track drug trafficking, the war on drugs, and other criminal activities. This goes back even before Bill Clinton. New database of stored calls was described in a filing Thursday in the case of a man accused of conspiring to unlawfully export goods to Iran, the Wall Street Journal reported. The DEA official said in the filing that the agency, which operates under the Justice Department, has long used administrative subpoenas, which we'll get into just quickly, not federal court orders. They're skirting the Fourth Amendment again to collect the metadata of U.S. calls to foreign countries. Now, some people might, metadata is not a big deal because that's like looking at who's looking in the file cabinet, not exactly what they're looking at. But they have no... The Fourth Amendment doesn't allow a dragnet, a metadata dragnet, a bulk collection. You have to be specific. You can't, because no judge is going to sign off. No sane judge, no judge that shouldn't be impeached and thrown in prison is going to sign off on a, let's monitor everybody because we can do that. The Fourth Amendment does not allow that. And they were using administrative subpoenas, so they're skirting the Fourth Amendment again. Although the court document only refers to outgoing calls, Sources familiar with the program say it also collected data on incoming calls. Program operated from 1990 to 2013. And they said the database was deleted, has not been searched since 2013. So the elder Bush, it goes back to him. So maybe can we throw the elder Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Hussein Obama in prison for violating the Fourth Amendment? Can we? Well, what if I was tapping somebody's call? What if I tapped my neighbor's phone just for the heck of it? I'd go to prison. More of the same here. For more than 2 decades, the Justice Department and the DA amassed logs of virtually all telephone calls from the USA to as many as 116 countries linked to drug trafficking. Current and former officials involved in the operation said the most targeted countries changed over time, but included Canada, Mexico, and most of Central and South America. This is a dragnet, folks. And again, end the war on drugs. Of course, I think Al-Qaeda, who does profit from the South American drug trade, doesn't want it legalized because they can kill their competition. Terrorist groups do profit off the illegality of drugs. The now discounted operation carried out by the DEA's intelligence arm was the government's first known effort to gather data on Americans in bulk. This is long before even the so-called war on terror, sweeping up records of telephone calls, so they intended to do this, period. It wasn't for terrorism, they were already doing it. Sweeping up records of telephone calls made by millions of U.S. citizens. And I'm not saying terrorism wasn't a threat at all back then, but it's really started picking up steam under the younger Bush. It was a model for the massive phone surveillance system the NSA launched to identify terrorists after the September 11th attacks. Dragnet drew sharp criticism that the government had intruded too deeply into Americans' privacy after former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, thank you, Edward, leaked it to the news media 2 years ago. More than a dozen current and former law enforcement and intelligence officials described the details of the Justice Department operation to USA Today. Most did so on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to publicly discuss the intelligence program, part of which remains classified. More of the same. The DEA program did not intercept the content of Americans' calls, but the records, which numbers were dialed and when, allowed agents to map suspects' communications and link them to troves of other police intelligence data, and of course location tracking with cell towers as well. At first, the drug agency did so with help from military computers and intelligence analysts. The data collection was one of the most important and effective federal drug law enforcement initiatives. The Justice Department said in a 1998 letter to Sprint, this is under Clinton, asking the telecom giant to turn over its call records. The previously undisclosed letter was signed by the head of the department's Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs section, Mary Lee Warren, who wrote that the operation had been approved at the highest levels of federal law enforcement authority, including then Attorney General Janet Reno, who I'm not sure if that's a man or a woman, and her deputy, Eric Holder. So imagine that. Janet Reno and Eric Holder acting just like the Bush administration. Imagine that. Now we're going to switch quickly to administrative subpoenas, which are illegal. But our government, again, these people don't care. They don't care. You're going to get steamrolled, people. I'm just trying to warn you. While focusing their resources and political energy on the NSA's mass collection of metadata, privacy advocates have neglected the most dangerous, institutionalized violations of the Fourth Amendment administrative subpoenas that the DEA has been using for a long time. Now, a U.S. District Court judge in Texas has ruled for the DEA that an administrative subpoena may be used to search medical records. It was inevitable, given the march towards illegally nullifying the Fourth Amendment. Through use of these judgeless bureaucrat warrants authorized by Congress, administrative subpoenas are issued unilaterally by government agencies, meaning without approval by neutral judges and without probable cause, stated under oath and affirmation, as required by the Fourth Amendment. There are now 336 federal statutes authorizing administrative subpoenas, according to the Department of Justice. So this, just par for the course. We have government agencies writing legislation and adding thousands of pages to legislation and no consent from Congress. So we might as well just do this too. In U.S. versus Zeta, the DEA obtained the records of 35 patient files without showing probable cause or obtaining a warrant issued by a judge. Citing New Deal era case law, Judge Reed O'Connor noted that the Supreme Court has refused to require that a federal agency have probable cause to justify issuance of an administrative subpoena, and that they may be issued merely on suspicion that the law is being violated or even just because it wants assurance that it is not. I thought you were innocent until proven guilty. This reminds me, like I said, wrote down there, civil asset forfeiture. You are assumed guilty. It is indeed fishing expeditions. Those constitutionally grotesque New Deal era, so this has been going on a long time, decisions violated the Fourth Amendment on its face and were ideological, progressive foolishness when issued against the likes of the Morton Salt Company in 1950. Now this corrupt precedent creating institutionalized violations of the Fourth Amendment has been applied to medical records. That's why I have no problem saying this country is becoming just like 1930s Germany. Then you go back to Hussein Obama doing the same thing that was done under the elder Bush and Clinton and even George W. Bush. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit today, this is back in May of 2015, held that the NSA's indiscriminate collection of Americans' telephone calling records exceeds the legal authority granted by the Patriot Act's controversial Section 215. So what was Bill Clinton and the elder Bush's excuse? Because the Patriot Act wasn't even around then. It's still illegal. Even if the Patriot Act allowed that, it's still illegal. Can Congress just pass laws that totally violate the Constitution just because they put it in legislation? I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. So what was the elder Bush's and Bill Clinton's excuse? And again, Obama doing the same exact thing that Bush was doing. Same crap. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. So, all my links are underneath as per usual. Let's get to the last one. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are both all in for the Patriot Act, and you will see this type of egregious violations of the Fourth Amendment and your privacy will continue no matter which one of these is elected. I'm just trying to warn you. You may want to look down the ballot and vote for somebody else. Hint, hint. If you'd like the Fourth Amendment stopped. The government stopping the Fourth Amendment. If you want the Patriot Act stopped and these violations of the Fourth Amendment. Here's a Democrat debate. Anderson Cooper, Secretary Clinton, do you regret your vote on the Patriot Act? Hillary Clinton, no, I don't. I think that it was necessary to make sure that we were able, after 9/11, to put in place the security that we needed. And it is true that it did require that there be a process. What happened, however, is that the Bush administration began to chip away at this process. And from what I've gone over in this long, arduous video, that's bullcrap. And I began to speak out about their use of warrantless surveillance, which I'm sure you knew was going on when Billy Boy was in there. I began to speak out about their use of warrantless surveillance, which is why you, of course, kept voting for the Patriot Act. And the other behavior that they engaged in. We always have to keep the balance of civil liberties. And there again, you got this balance crap. Privacy and security. It's not easy in a democracy when we do not live in a democracy. But we have to keep it in mind. Edward Snowden. Anderson Cooper asks, Secretary Clinton, hero or traitor? She responds, he broke the laws of the U.S. He could have been a whistleblower. Yeah. Could have gotten all those protections of being a whistleblower. He could have raised all the issues that he has raised. And I think there would have been a positive response to that. Even after Snowden doing this, has the government relented? No, they haven't. They don't care. They don't care. Should he do jail time? Clinton. In addition, he stole very important information. No, he exposed corruption. And he exposed violations of the Constitution. He stole very important information that has unfortunately fallen to a lot of the wrong hands. How about all the data that from private people that fell into government hands? So I don't think he should be brought home without facing the music. Same crap, different person. And lastly, here's Donald Trump on the Patriot Act. You may have to look down the ballot in November, folks. You have been warned.
What about, though, on the issue that I brought up, though? Do you think the NSA should have the ability to collect all the data that it was able to before?
Well, I err on the side of security, Joe. You know, it's a very interesting issue. But I happen to be, and I've been there from the beginning. I've been there from before the Paris attack. You know, after every attack, everybody says exactly this. But I err on the side of security. I err on the side of security. You know, every time I pick up a phone, I assume people are listening to my conversations. I don't like it, but I have to make that assumption. I would really much err on the side of security. And a lot of people would agree with me on that.
Donald